Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I might just take the flag.
See what is there.
I keep going back.
There's no.
Can't even figure out.
Hey, you sometimes use your tablet.
Change the scope.
This is just an
And
idea.
say people, all these other things. And then investing dollars for 12
No.
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense to
I was
me.
like, I
You
need
want
to.
something.
And your question about that actually. Very valid. The only thing I. You can always have it. And you can always make money there, you just. thing is-
Do we have anybody on?
Bad, yeah.
Live, right?
How are you?
We're doing something else out. You could supplement.
He passed away.
I think pages been yet.
Yeah.
No commission tomorrow. Yeah. Commission tomorrow. I think.
The increase.
How are you, Bob? I'm doing, you know what? I'm doing better and better all the time. Hey, John.
How are you over there? Are your kids in the Brookings tournament this weekend or are they going somewhere else?
No, so we, on some ways, he's playing for Brandon, right? So.
I thought we were having a meeting, I thought. Let's pledge of allegiance on,
So, yeah, I mean,
then you probably,
so which is definitely a just,
you know,
of strength by her goalie.
they're entering.
Yes.
Yes, there is. And look, not a flag in the room. There's,
Yeah, well, they pulled out the W.
do you know what direction you face it?
Here in Sioux Falls.
A long shot.
Yeah, so and we were in Wisconsin last week and Siren was.
There you go.
All I know is without in the Senate,
I would too.
on the state discipline. Resident of Sioux Falls. I'm still state level and listen to all the.
That's not great. Are you on that with Jeff Shield?
Yeah.
Baptism.
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
He's my brother-in-law.
Well, a month in.
You only get
State
baptized once.
discipline, you have a little baby.
We have with the buddy.
I'm not sure if he's on.
We all get to face you.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Aren't you going? Yes.
Yeah, I wish I wouldn't have asked.
Okay.
Where's Joe?
Well, we have representatives from every association. I've been in Sioux Falls since
I would hate.
Disappointing.
That's why I would.
Right there.
This is where I think. I don't know, state's attorney.
State's attorney.
It's supposed to be Megan.
You're not left yet or not.
Are we ready?
He wasn't leaving until later.
Tyler, are we ready? I'm going to call this meeting to order and I'm going to ask you to stand for the pledge of allegiance. There's not one in the room, but it's on the agenda. So we face Cindy. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And this is a special meeting on the fairgrounds. I would like to start with introductions because I'm sorry, I'm not really good at everybody's. So we're just going to start here in the corner with the commission. We're going to go around our table. And then we're going to do that rows over there if you wouldn't mind. So.
Minnehaha County Commissioner. Carol Bennigan, County Commissioner.
Kim Christensen, Commission Recorder.
Wendy Heiberger, Commissioner. Jean Bender, Commissioner.
Ian Karski, Commissioner. Jeff Eckhoff, City of Sioux Falls. Eric Nyberg, Cutler Law Firm.
Then Kite, Minnehaha County Auditor.
Minnehaha County Commission Office.
Susan Beeman, Auditor's Office.
Markins, Director of Facilities, Minnehaha County.
Earl Muller, Commission Administrative Officer. Sylvia Walters from Pipestone Holdings.
Mike Jamison, retired.
John Carroll from Stammens Financial Group.
Bob Timian, retired.
Amy Pocola, I'm representing the community.
Heidi's Wainwright. I'll go with I'm representing the community as well.
Charlie Smith, Smith Architecture and Planning. Joel Feldman, Convention Sports and Leisure International.
We'll get two people on Zoom.
Good morning. My name is Chad Bigler. I will say I'm representing the community as well.
We have another person on Zoom. Back row.
Julie Hammer, Empire Fair.
Scott Wicks, Empire Fair. Stu Horsey with Knife River. Mark Meyer, Knife River.
Okay.
This is all media,
We have media people here, so,
and Adam's online.
and Adam is online. Hello, Adam. We're glad you're here. Okay, we're gonna move on. This is a special meeting. Item number one is Lions Fairground Task Force Marketing and Economic Analysis Report by Charlie Joel. Take over.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming together. I know it's been a little quiet on the project here for a while, but we've been digging into the numbers, going through market analysis, competitive analysis, all the economics and cost estimating and things of that nature. And we're here today to present our findings. And Joel Feldman and DSL will do that.
Charlie, thank you, commissioners. Happy to be here. It has been 3.5 months that we've been working on this study process, and been a lot of hard work and a lot of help that we've gotten from the community. So I certainly appreciate the assistance from the commissioners, from the task force, from the fairgrounds, and everybody else that's been a part of this process. So with that, without further ado, I'll jump into the commissioner's permission. I'll jump into the presentation. So CSL International is a third-party consulting firm based out of Minneapolis. We do work all across the country with communities that are looking into potential investments into some sort of. In this case, we were looking at the WH Lyon Fairgrounds plan effort. In conjunction with Smith Architecture, we conducted a market feasibility analysis of the potential opportunities for an investment into the WH Lyon Fairgrounds. The process included detailed analysis of the historical operations of the fairgrounds, a very deep dive into the local market to understand what community assets exist and what opportunities exist with further investment in the fairgrounds complex. Benchmarking against comparable facilities and destinations throughout the country, an analysis of the industry trends from the fairgrounds and multi-purpose event facility industry, as well as detailed market research into the potential user groups that would be attracted to an event facility, an improved event facility here in Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County. Based off of that research and interviews with benchmarking with over 40 competitive facilities throughout the region and the country, and with over 40 interviews of current past users and potential users, we developed projections of the financial implications and the economic implications of investing into the fairgrounds complex. The reason that we've been tasked with this is the importance of the fairgrounds complex within the Sioux Falls community. It is a tremendous asset hosting the Sioux Empire Fair, attracting over 60,000 attendees a year, which is, as I understand, larger than the state fair in Huron that is from the last few years. It's a well-positioned asset right off of Interstate 29, close proximity to downtown Sioux Falls and some of the assets there with hotels, restaurants, entertainment, and other amenities. And it's also an important asset from a community perspective, hosting a variety of different local events, whether it's the Renaissance Festival, the Kennel Club, the Food Shelf, as well as the economic impact that it's generating through attracting events from outside of Minnehaha County and Sioux Falls that otherwise, without the presence of the multi-purpose event facilities, these events wouldn't be here, the economic benefits. Brief overview of fairgrounds itself, 80-acre site with 150,000 square foot exhibition hall, seating capacity for right around 1,800, a typical 3,000 for the max capacity for some of the largest events that are brought in there. For the inside of the expo hall, it's very multi-purpose space that hosts a lot of different types of events, whether they are dirt floor related, flat concrete floor, trade shows, consumer shows, events that are helping the economy of the community, but also those that are helping the quality of life of the greater Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County marketplace. Some of those events that are enhancing that quality of life, the flea market, Temple Church, Food Giveaway, Drumline. Some of these events are held at the fairgrounds because realistically, they aren't able to be held anywhere else. One of the benefits of the location of the fairgrounds is the proximity and the central location within the community to provide really great access for these community participants and the members. If it were to be relocated somewhere else, that would be a significant challenge that we would face in terms of being able to provide that quality asset to these groups that so desperately need this space in the community. But importantly, importantly, there is an impact that you have on the community as well, like the Kennel Club and hosting over 2,000 attendees for their annual event and the revenues and the economic impact that they're generating. The impact that the food giveaway has on the community and the maintaining the quality of life here in Minnehaha County are important assets to remember the fairgrounds offers. In terms of the overall operations of the fairgrounds, this is where we get into some of the details and the numbers. And I don't want to belabor this point too much, but we are doing a significant amount of events on an annual basis, generating over 500,000 attendees to the fairgrounds. And Expo Center itself is operating at a pretty strong occupancy rate. Typically, what we look for with multi-purpose event facilities is somewhere in a 50 to 70% range for occupancy. The reason for that is that there are natural dark days that occur from holidays, that occur from lack of interest from the events that are coming in, needing to clean up and change over and do all of the maintenance and repairs. These venues typically don't operate at 100% occupancy, rather that 50 to 70% range is where we'd like to see them. Despite the existing conditions of the Expo Hall today, you're still operating at somewhere between a 35 to 47% occupancy, which is a very strong occupancy rate for the complex, and obviously is showing the importance of this asset. From an operational standpoint, we took a look at the financial operations over the past 6 years at the fairgrounds complex. For the most part, it is self-sustaining. This is a unique feature within the market. Many of these multi-purpose event facilities do require a subsidy in the country. The fact that we are operating in the black is a strong positive for the WH Lyon Fairgrounds. A big reason for that is the Sioux Empire Fair and the revenue that's generated. Last year, I believe it was close to $500,000 in net profit that the fair was able to bring in. Without that, the complex would be operating at a likely 6-figure deficit on an annual basis to be able to provide the services and the economic impact for them.
Question, how can you say without public subsidy? We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year into the fairgrounds.
In terms of the facility maintenance and repairs.
And just 150,000 to the contract to the fair board to run the fairgrounds.
Yes, sir. And thank you for the correction. So the $150,000 would be required to maintain that subsidy and maintain that profitability at the complex. Thank you very much for that. Team.
So there is a public subsidy.
Yes. Return that we
Is
get.
that reflected in your numbers? Here, 150,000?
Yes, it is. This is the full operations. The only thing that has been taken out of is non operating revenues and expenses, things like interest expense, depreciation, things of that nature. This is intended to showcase the financial operations of the company. Scott.
The $150,000 that we get a year is a management, where we lease the property from the county, and that is a management fee that we manage the property with. I would say that the other hundreds of thousands, which is probably $150,000 to $200,000 a year, which we're very grateful for, our maintenance and upkeep of the county's assets that you would have no matter who is running the facility. And they are the county's buildings and their facility.
So that management fee is reflected in operating revenues. Where exactly? Is that contract services or where is that?
And Commissioner Bender, I'd like to take a moment to, I believe that those, that 150,000 was taken out. I would want to double check and get back to you on that. But I believe that $150,000 was taken out. It was, as Scott described it, as a management fee. I don't think it is in these numbers, but I can double check and get back to you on that specifically.
So if we put that 150 back in, there'd be another 150,000 profitability?
Yes, sir. If that is taken
And
out.
you mentioned interest expense. Is there debt?
Pardon me?
Is there, when you said interest expense, is there debt on this facility?
Interest expenses on bank accounts, minimal dollars, on something like that. There's no debt on the facility, as I understand it.
Scott, can you clarify that?
Yeah,
Because it really is minimal, Bob.
The Swim Empire Fair Association is debt free. We have a lease for a floor scrubber. But that's it. Otherwise, we have no debt.
Under the operating expenses, the insurance line, that's the Fair Board's insurance expense. It's not the insurance that the county pays for property insurance for the buildings.
Liability.
So it is what the county,
No.
it's not, it's what the Fair Board pays. So that would be one of the other items is the insurance that we pay for all the properties. That's probably not factored into here. It comes under the cost of the county providing that to the fairgrounds.
You're gonna have
Other expense.
insurance wherever this building is.
Yes, no, but insurance, I mean, when you look at expenses, you gotta figure all expenses. It doesn't matter if it's subsidy, it's our insurance, it's the deductibles that we pay for the part of the roof blowing off of the building. Rebuilding the parking lot, the hundreds of thousands that we've had over the years. I mean, there's a lot of ongoing expenses that the county picks up. So I was just wondering the reality of these operating expenses don't factor in what the county puts in. It's just what the Fair Board is paying for expenses.
From a capital repair and replacement standpoint, fixing buildings, fixing the parking lots, things of that nature are not included in this. This is just the annual operating operations of the complex and what revenues and expenses are generated and expended on an annual basis. The point to this really is to highlight the fact that from an operational standpoint, there is minimal, if any, investment required in order to maintain the operations of the facility on an annual basis. $150,000 from a management fee, the capital repair and replacement is holding that separate just to operate the complex. It is very close to in the black on an annual basis based off of the operations of the fair and based off of the economic impact that is being generated. And that's part of the reason for the investment. I would argue from the community standpoint is the return on investment that the community gets in terms of the new spending, which is something that we're going to get into here.
Okay, question. I guess I'm not understanding. What is this financial statement for the Fair Association or their operation of the fairgrounds? What is this? So that, for instance, out of that $150,000 management fee, I'm sure there are salaries paid and those things. Are those included in here or how does that work out?
The salaries, wages, and benefits are all included in this. This is for the operations of the fairgrounds
So
in total.
So the 150,000 is not included in here, but all the
I
expenses incurred with the 150,000 are included.
don't, and again, I would like to double check to make sure that the $150,000 has been. But the expenses in terms of the salaries, wages, and benefits that are paid are included.
Including the
I don't
Fair
think
Association.
revenue of the $150,000 is included. I would want to double check that too. Is that,
Well, it just seems that it's a financial statement that's pulled together with some things pulled out and other things not inserted. And it doesn't seem like it's giving a picture of the whole item as to what is there. That's all, because I guess if there's another 150,000. If that 150,000 isn't included in the revenue, then there's another 150,000 of profitability that can help with ongoing maintenance and everything else and all those things. So I think it would be nice to get the whole picture as to where that's at.
and I can clarify that after this.
And maybe you can add just a footnote or something that the facilities are provided at no cost. So it doesn't really prevent, I mean, it doesn't provide a true picture of the overall operation. I think it's more to Mr. Timian's point, it provides, with the $150,000 in, it would provide an overview of what the fair board is.
So those parents that still have an adult in the basement, it doesn't charge rent. It is a non-revenue asset.
I know you're not speaking.
No, not for, not for. I have heard other.
Thank you for that clarification.
Are there any other questions on this slide before we? So, as I alluded to, there is a benefit that is afforded to the county and the community for investing into the WH Lion Fairgrounds. In terms of the annual events, event days that are generating the attendance, the 500,000 people on an annual basis that are brought into Minnehaha County. Generate roughly $21 million in direct annual spending that is new to the market, whether they are people coming in from outside of Minnehaha County and spending nights in hotel rooms, whether they are driving in from outside of the area and spending money at restaurants, on entertainment, transportation or other retail or other elements within the county. Anything from the community people that already are in Minnehaha County is not included numbers. We have removed any of the spending from the community representatives with the understanding that it's likely that they would have spent those dollars in the community even without the fairgrounds complex. So these numbers are intended to be net new dollars on a basis that are being spent in the community. Yes, sir.
Will you track non-residents at events? Is that how you determine that, or?
Yeah, we estimated the percentage of people that were local, that were day trippers, that were just coming in and driving back home at night, and those that were non-local and spending the night in.
You know what that ratio that you used, I mean, as far as what percentage of attendance was non-residents?
It was different based off of the different types of events, whether it was the fair, the trade shows, the equestrian or livestock shows, the dog show, things of that nature. Each of them had a different ratio dependent on historical activity.
Well, just the biggest one being the fair, of course, with that.
The fair, I believe, was, I want to say 45% of people would come from outside of the area.
Thank you.
So are those percentages based on some national numbers that you have, or is that based on something that was really more specific to Minnehaha County
It was
events?
based off of the conversations with Scott and his team and some of the data that they've collected over the years in terms of taking a look at people, the license plates on cars as they're walking through the parking lot, on estimations on the percentage of participants from conversations with event rights holders, the people that are renting out the fairgrounds, and conversations from their standpoint in terms of the percentage of people that are non-local versus local. And, before I move on, I do want to note the fiscal impact was also measured in terms of the new sales tax revenue that is generated. The state is a little bit of a challenge to try and highlight. I mean, it's at $1.2 million in state tax revenue from the activity that's going on throughout the Minnehaha community with these new visitors. That could be a little bit challenging just because of the nature of where people are coming and whether they're outside of the state or inside of the state. City sales tax revenue, really roughly half a $400,000 to $500,000 on an annual basis is projected to be new on an annual basis from activity that is coming in from outside of the area. In addition to that, roughly $300,000 a year in terms of both the tourism and the business improvement district tax that is generated from people for various events throughout the year. That this is what is occurring today, even without further investment with the investment that's being made by the county today in terms of operating the fairgrounds complex. This is what is currently. So understanding where we sit currently, we started taking a look very closely at a variety of different elements and skim through these pretty quickly. So if there are any questions, please feel free to stop me. We started with an analysis of the location of the Sioux Falls Market and Fairgrounds Complex within the greater regional marketplace. Many of the attendees for events on a weekly basis, Monday through Thursday, are going to be coming in from about a 15-minute drive radius. Those are the ones that are going to be most actively utilizing the space. Those that are coming in from about 30 minutes are attendees that are a little bit more frequent, participating in some of the public consumer shows, some of the equestrian livestock shows. We'd anticipate a wider number of attendees for weekend events, for larger annual events, for things like the State Fair, the County Fair, 90 minutes, an hour and a half drive. Some of the events like motocross or some of the other events that are held at the complex that are weekend events. That 90-minute to a 3-hour drive. 3-hour drive are going to be the ones that are primarily going to be people that are spending the night. Anticipate more economic impact generators. These drive rings are important, especially as we're comparing some of the markets and understanding the positioning of Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County within the greater context of sustainable operations of cinema. If you deep dive into the demographic and socioeconomic as part of the market, noted as a strong positive for the complex as an opportunity to host and attract into the community. We took from some additional analysis in terms of the average household income, number of businesses, where the spending from concerts or retail sales is generated from throughout the greater community. And then took a look from an infrastructure standpoint at the, importantly, as we're looking at this as a potential asset to generate economic benefit with community, it's important to understand the hotel inventory to be able to accommodate those events and types of activities that would be coming in and spending the night for multiple days. Importantly, within roughly 5 years of the Line Fairgrounds, we have a little over 1,800 hotel rooms consisting only of properties that have more than 100. The Greater Sioux Falls Marketplace, there's well over 5,000 hotel sleeping rooms that can accommodate events. Significant advantage over some of the smaller communities throughout the state, throughout the region, that don't have that visitor industry infrastructure that Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County. Some of the things that we'll do, the conversations with event rights holders, the user groups that we like about Sioux Falls are not only the hotel inventory, but the proximity to restaurants, retail and entertainment options, which are assets that help to drive that non-local usage from groups and that interest from groups outside of the community. In terms of the hotel operations, it's important to understand from a community perspective, we have opportunities to add more economic benefit into the community by way of adding more hotel room nights. Take a look at the annual occupancy and seasonality of occupancy within hotel properties, taking a look at the average daily rate, which is the nightly rate that people spend at the hotel properties. I suggest that there are opportunities for adding additional room nights. Conversations with the CVB, I have indicated opportunities to add additional room nights into the market by bringing in equestrian livestock, consumer show, trade shows, other events from outside of the area. Another important analysis that we conducted is inventorying the existing event facilities in the Sioux Falls Marketplace and understanding from that standpoint, economically, what is going on at other venues to make sure that anything that we are projecting to develop at the WH Lyon Fairgrounds will be additive to the market as a whole. Events at the Convention Center and Arena at the Center at Sanford Pentagon are important community economic impact generating events and activities. We don't want to create competition by developing space at the fairgrounds to compete against those events. So importantly, any new events that we're projecting are going to be additive to what is going on elsewhere in the community. Additionally, and importantly, one of the things that we noted very early on in the process is the strength of investment in the public assembly facilities throughout. Sioux Falls has a very strong reputation as a strong event market, facility market. Investment that's been made in the Premier Center and the Convention Center, the investment that's been made in the Pentagon and Levitt Pavilion. These are assets that highlight the community pride and are highlighting the opportunity that Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County have in terms of being able to attract and are open for business for non-local events. One of the things with the fairgrounds that is challenging is as you drive into it, you don't have that same presence at the fairgrounds complex as you do with some of these other facilities. Lack of a grand entrance as you're driving up to it, you don't really have a sense of arrival as you do with these complexes. And the fairgrounds complex really seems from an industry standard standpoint somewhat out of place relative to these other event facilities that exist today in the Sioux Falls, Minnehaha County.
Just for you. Did you account for some of the new properties coming online, the 60,000 square foot at the steel district of flat floor or convention trade?
And then we've got a more detailed analysis. It was just to highlight a handful of the primary complexes that's our analysis of the local market. Beyond just the local market, we took a look at the competitive landscape, statewide and regional marketplace. First, from a multi-purpose fairground event center complex. Facilities that have dirt floor capabilities to host equestrian, livestock, and agricultural flat floor facilities that can host public consumer shows, trade shows, concerts, a variety of different events throughout the state and regional marketplace. The WH Lyon Fairground represents relatively well on paper in terms of the amount of size and space that it currently offers. One of the challenges is that as you look at the fairgrounds that is being currently reinvested in, Lancaster events that's been invested in, and Bonner Park down in Grand Island that has recently received a grant from the state of Nebraska and has a nine-figure budget for a master plan that is currently underway, along with development of a casino and hotel property. We're seeing significant reinvestment in some of these event complexes elsewhere throughout the regional market. But that position, despite that, Sioux Falls is well positioned in terms of the location, in terms of the event space, the size of the complex, and the opportunities that exist to be able to attract events into the marketplace.
If just kind of keep things consistent, if I may. So I'm looking at where did you get the 52,000 square feet for the fairgrounds of contiguous exhibit space?
That is within, I believe, Center Hall, and part of that is excluded with South Hall because of columns and the separation of the spaces that are included there.
So that's the center of the expo building.
Part of the center of the expo building. 75,000 square feet total with columns and some of the other challenges with hosting events, and it reduces the overall contiguous spaces we're.
The total indoor event space, what buildings are all included in that 176?
You've got
The Armory.
we have included in there as well. There's some meeting space as well. I believe the food space as well. The primary is 100.
When I look, and then on the next page, it talks about the Denny Sanford Premier Center, but those numbers don't include the convention center or the arena. Correct.
So this, the Premier Center, it doesn't, I believe, does not include that. This is, as I recall looking at this, was the convention center event space that's in. Offered to indoor That space that we'd be looking at like in somewhere such as North Hall in the Expo building and elsewhere. And realistically, what we're trying to do is make sure that we're not competing with a competitive facility, but it's also a local facility. It's one that we don't want generating direct competition to, identifying opportunities to attract events that are not spectrum, Hanford Center, the Convention Center, attracting is analysis of.
Yeah, page 14 says the convention center and arena has over 100,000 square feet of space.
If you include the arena, both of the arena.
Okay. I'm not sure of the significance between it, but there's a lot of inconsistency.
And it's intended to be a comparative analysis as we're taking a look at some of the facilities and the way that they're being marketed and utilized from a relative standpoint. And from the analysis of competitive facilities throughout not only the city, but throughout the regional market, understanding the protective position that the Expo Center and Ryan Fairgrounds would have in the market is what we're trying to achieve with the. Any other questions? We also took a look at entertainment spaces throughout the open market, the regional marketplace. One of the things that we did note is despite the strength of the indoor arena standpoint, there is a somewhat more limited market for outdoor entertainment spaces. There's one opportunity from a 180-acre site, multi-purpose event facility complex site, is being able to host outdoor festivals or entertainment events. We do have the Levitt Pavilion downtown, which is focused primarily on free local events, which is a somewhat different marketplace than some of the touring concerts and larger shows. It does suggest that there may be a potential opportunity to further exploration here, and we can talk about that a little bit more here. So after taking a look at the competitive facility inventory, we did a deep dive in comparable markets and industry trends to understand where the industry currently sits, and the spaces that are offered, taking a look at successfully operated complexes, their financial operations, their economic benefits back to the community, the space that they offered and the position that they have within the marketplace. We identified 15 complexes throughout the country that have a similar market presence, or a market presence that WH Lyon, Fairgrounds, and Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County would aspire to achieve. Venues like Expo New Mexico and the Expo Square in Tulsa, Extraco Event Center are some larger complexes that are attracting national and regional shows and events, and understanding what their marketplaces offer in these events in. It's important to do a comparative analysis on where Sioux Falls sits relative to some of these other markets to see if there are opportunities from a high level basis to say that there may be a chance to have Sioux Falls attracting these types of events. Venues like Grand Island, Nebraska, and Fountain Park, Amarillo, Waco, even Redmond, Oregon are venues that are doing a significant amount of regional, statewide, niche national economic events. The Grand Island is attracting a variety of national equestrian, livestock, and agriculture to their complex. Sioux Falls and WH Lyon Fairgrounds, from a demographic standpoint, does compare very favorably to these markets in terms of population, average household income, and other metrics that we've taken a look at.
How are we getting these demographics?
There's an aggregator service called Petri that provides demographic analysis for markets throughout the country. The analysis that we pulled was the drive rings that we were talking about earlier, the 15, 30, 90, and 180-minute drive rings. It's a consistent data source that, from a comparative analysis standpoint, provides similar style of data from different populations, counts from different sources. This is a consistent one from a comparative.
Okay.
We also took a look at comparable amphitheaters throughout the country, just from a conceptual standpoint, to see if there was an opportunity and where we would potentially sit. Festival or outdoor and space. And similar to the multi-purpose event facility, comparable markets that were identified, those also can relatively well.
Or what difference between an amphitheater and an arena seating? How do you define that?
So the arena would be fully enclosed, four walls and roofs. An amphitheater would have ideally a roof, but it would be open air, and capacity could be much more flexible, where you've got covering over part or a portion of the seating, but then additional uncovered capacity that is much more flexible.
You consider Levitt to be an amphitheater?
It would be an outdoor.
So amphitheater as a concept ranges from what Red Rocks is to Levitt.
Beyond taking a look at facilities, we did take a look at industry trends throughout the country. One of the important elements to note is that these event facilities, despite being labeled as multi-purpose and highly flexible, cannot be everything to everybody. We need to try and hone in on the types of events and activities that would be best suited for this complex. And part of the analysis that we're doing from a local market standpoint, from a community standpoint, has started to narrow down the focus on the different types of events that we would want to highlight at the WH Lyon Fairgrounds, specifically between the community events and the services that it provides to local organizations that don't have the capacity to pay the high rental rates and access fees at various other event facilities throughout the community marketplace, but also from a dirt floor standpoint and ag, equestrian, livestock shows that really have the opportunity to generate economic impact in the community and provide a service to the area. Those are market segments that we can focus on with the WH Lyon Fairgrounds, as well as larger public and consumer shows, trade shows, things of that nature that, again, are not looking at the downtown convention center or don't have access to the available dates that the convention center offers, as busy as that complex is, to have a secondary facility that has the capacity to be able to accommodate events in the marketplace on a platform, trade show, public shows.
If I may, going back to that slide, Nick, it seems to me that there should be more significance related to the slide than 10 seconds. So this is the fairgrounds and all the facilities and how it brings it in. We weren't given this for us to look at it till about a half hour before this meeting, so that's why I'm a little confused. So kind of go over the significance of what you're looking at here.
So with multi-purpose event facilities and complexes throughout the country, we typically have three different types of events available. So the sporting events, the amateur sports, professional sports, indoors, outdoors. You'll have performances, concerts, entertainment events, things that special events that are ticketed for the most part. And you'll have meetings such as conventions, conferences, trade shows. Each of these different types of facilities requires different space offerings. For example, sports activity, you need to have a large flat space in order to be able to accommodate indoor amateur sports and set up courts and nets and goals, which is conducive with a convention center. But the sporting events that require the seating for a primary tenant, like a hockey tenant or a basketball tenant, would be more conducive with a concert or performance venue. The seating element with a concert performance venue can be somewhat of a challenge for some certain meetings, events, conventions, and trade shows because of the inflexible nature of the fixed seating component to it. However, there are certain conventions and trade shows that have a speaker, a keynote that requires that seating element, and having that overlap is kind of what's highlighted. There is some overlap, but at the end of the day, and what's really highlighted on the right-hand side of the slide, the different types of events that typically go on throughout the country at these event venues on the different types of spaces that are offered within various complexes really varies significantly based off of the type of market that you are looking to attract.
So this really has nothing to do with what we specifically have, but on the right side there, the conventions require a high quality finish. So that's the relativity that you're putting to it. All these different things, okay.
So with the convention center, you would typically, for example, you would have the high ceilings in your exhibition hall. You have a ballroom with carpeted space, chandeliers, wall treatments, good access to food and beverage and kitchen facilities, breakout meeting rooms with carpeting, shorter ceilings, but a high number of those breakout meeting rooms to be able to accommodate the various state, regional, and national conventions and trade shows that are looking for that space. Whereas with a event complex such as this, it tends to be more large exhibition concrete floor space with more limited access to that ballroom or carpeted space within the marketplace. You still need to have some measure of that typically for show office space for some of the breakout meeting, smaller breakouts than a typical convention or trade show or conference would host. But there are some nuances to each of the different types of events and activities that typically are brought into these types of facilities throughout the year. And yes, thank you, Charlie. And having the capacity to bring them, typically don't want to be too much dirt into your convention center space. It's expensive, it's challenging to clean out.
Monster trucks.
Bring it in for the rodeo at the arena, but not going to be doing a whole lot of changeovers with that one, but to have a separate.
And the mirror factor also.
So moving on, taking a look again from an industry's trends standpoint, it's important, especially considering the economic climate that we've been dealing with for the past few years, to understand that if we are looking to invest into this type of an event facility, is the return going to be there? We've been dealing with challenging times in recent years from an economic standpoint. It's important to highlight the fact that despite the major economic challenges that this country has faced over the past few decades, there has been a bounce back both within the economy and the multipurpose event facility. And it's interesting to note that the bounce back is consistent within the economy and the multipurpose event facility in terms of the numbers of exhibiting companies, the numbers of attendees. This is a very mature industry from flat floor to equestrian, livestock, ag shows. Historically and consistently, our country, our economy has shown a need to gather, to meet, and a desire to do so and to be seen in different ways and unique ways to go about doing that and seeing some of the trends that are going on in the marketplace as a result of what's coming out of this COVID pandemic in terms of having more virtual meeting opportunities, having more open air meeting spaces and opportunities to spread out, to gather and to explore different areas have been things that we've seen come much more to the forefront based off of the COVID pandemic. We're still seeing a variety of different unique industry trends from an event facility development standpoint that we want to highlight in terms of the new facility. One of the challenges that we have right now with the Expo Center is the fact that there's been, it is not, we consider industry standard in terms of the support services, in terms of the HVAC, in terms of some of the utilities that are operating space relative to what we're seeing in some of these other complexes throughout the country. And being able to provide some of the services and having a more industry standard facility may provide opportunities to run different events. Some of the other industry-wide trends that we've seen are some of the destination development investments around facilities and complexes. Brands at the moment in Colorado, which is a market about an hour and north of Denver. That is helping to not only drive event activity at the complex, but also economic impact. seeing outdoor event space and the flexibility of the Expo Square. Self-promoted events that are being hosted at venues like Idaho Horse Park and the equestrian livestock rodeo events that they're hosting there. Food and beverage continues to be an important revenue generator and attending attractor, not only for fairs themselves, but for the events that are being held at multipurpose event facilities. Being able to have the capacity to attract this market segment and people that are looking for that unique experience at the fair and fairgrounds that we make as well. And then things like community events and streaming technology continue to rise in the forefront. And these are things that we're able to do at a certain level at the WH Line Fairgrounds are not up to industry standards in many respects and the facilities that we currently have available. We also took a look at some of the concert economics in terms of the opportunity to bring in outside concerts from outdoor event. There were a variety of different tiers and acts that are brought into a market and event space, depending on the size of the complex, depending on the market itself, and depending on the appeal of the destination. Where historically there's been a shift about 10, 15, 20 years ago in terms of the economics surrounding hosting of concerts and performance acts. And a lot of the dollars that used to go to venue operations have leaked out and have now gone to booking agents, artists, and promoters. Venue operations tend to get less and less of that revenue that was being generated by these events, unless they are either self-promoted events or are highly sought after ones. So it does present a bit of a challenge to enter into the marketplace from an outdoor entertainment standpoint, unless you are targeting the right market segment. You want to make sure that the investment and the risk that you are taking on from a concert promoter standpoint is appropriate for the venue, appropriate. And then facility design characteristics that you're seeing, and I was alluding to earlier, things such as flexibility and subdivisibility, complex, high quality retractable seating. This is something that we currently have at the Expo Center right now. We do have flexible seating, as I was alluding to earlier. We've got a typical setup of 1,800 seats in that center expo hall space with a rodeo arena, with a concert venue that can be expanded up to roughly 3,000. But that is it very labor intensive and is not consistent with industry standards that we see at, say, the Denny Sanford Premier Center or other multi-purpose event facility complexes throughout the regional market. Other trends that we're seeing is enhancing the overall experience through outdoor spaces. As I mentioned before, food and beverage and casual, flexible spaces, including public art, highlighting the community, the destination, tying in with the marketing of the overall destination. This is a welcoming mat to many people from outside of Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County that otherwise wouldn't be here, but for the presence of equestrian livestock related events, and being able to give them some exposure to other elements within the Sioux Falls and Minnehaha marketplace. An important opportunity that can be leveraged by having an asset like this at the WH Line Fairgrounds.
Question for you on that one. If those are the trends, where are we seeing these trends being built? Is it on existing campuses? Is it on new campuses? If there's an urban environment involved, are they being built in the urban environment? Or are they being built out of town?
Yes to all of that. There's been investment in existing facilities throughout the country that are looking at better enhancing the experience of the guests that they're bringing in right now. As we see new builds, as we're seeing new investment into these complexes, whether it's the professional stadiums, whether it's convention centers, whether it's equestrian livestock complexes throughout the country, they are seeing the value of that investment into better enhancing their overall operational capacity, as well as leveraging the marketability of the destination and trying to enhance that opportunity for not only people extending stays, but also coming back at later dates to explore what they didn't have the opportunity to do so while they're there for that event. Markets like Waco, Texas have invested recently in new facilities. Theirs was more of a multi-purpose indoor amateur sports complex, but also beautification of outdoor complex. We're working right now with Columbus, Ohio, the state of Ohio, and the Ohio State Fair. A big piece of what they're looking at reinvesting in is the overall experience of people coming onto the fairgrounds from the moment they drive up and see the space, to the experience they have with parking, entrance, to having shade and seating structures, to being able to market different assets, not only throughout the Columbus market, but the state of Ohio, and highlighting all of the different elements that are unique to that district, that state, that community. Some of the events, these multi-purpose complexes that historically we haven't really seen a lot, that we're starting to and have been emerging in recent years, include events such as esports, drone racing, stream talks, AR, VR experience, a lot of new technology that is being offered and the experience and access to these types of events are opportunities not only for the Fairgrounds complex, but other event and locations throughout the Sioux Falls market. These are things that we're seeing in the industry that we're not necessarily suggesting are definite opportunities for the Fairgrounds complex, but there are things that are able to be explored that are additional opportunities. One of the things that we'll get into here in a moment in terms of our projections is we've tried to identify the true opportunities, the actionable opportunities from an event standpoint that would translate into new revenue, that would translate into new economic activity. There are other events and activities that really cannot be quantified just based off of the fact that there are these opportunities to create these events and would require further exploration into the marketplaces. These are some of the examples of those additional events that could be attracted to the market, could be attracted to the complex, that really aren't being quantified here, projections later on. So in terms of analyzing what those opportunities are, the analysis that was conducted was started with ESL's experience in conducting over 2,000 studies. Local market visit from about 3.5 months ago consisted of meeting with over 70 different local area stakeholders, community members, commission members, event producers, local market stakeholders, and people that are tied into the community, the economics of the community, as an in WH Lining Fairgrounds and its operations. Beyond that, we did outreach to current, past, and potential new user groups of the fairgrounds. Over 40 telephone interviews were completed with these organizations to understand from their standpoint, would you, if you're coming to the fairgrounds right now, would you continue to come back? And if so, are there improvements that would be needed in order for you to come back? If there were improvements made, we could grow and expand the events and activities that you're doing, either in terms of new event dates, longer events, or would you be able to attract more attendees to the current facilities, with more facilities available on the complex site. From a event rights standpoint holder that is not currently coming to the fairgrounds complex, understanding what is it about the Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County marketplace that is not attractive? Why are you not coming right now to this marketplace? What is needed from an event facility standpoint in order to be able to bring you in? What is needed from a destination standpoint in terms of hotel rooms, access, entertainment, retail, or other elements that would be able to bring you into the marketplace in the future? And understanding from these past users and the potential new user groups, what in the over 500 different annual events that these organizations represent, coming back with recommendations, projections in terms of what is needed at the complex, at the fairgrounds in order to be able to sustain operations and control the marketplace as a whole. In terms of the current and past users, well, one thing that we noted was the attractiveness of the fairgrounds location and the strength of the Sioux Falls market. I think we did this a number of times here today. The proximity to I-29, the access to the local community, the access from outside user groups being able to come right down the highway with their trucks and trailers to load in and load out, to having access to the hotels, restaurants, downtown Sioux Falls, other amenities really makes this location a very attractive spot for the fairgrounds and the multi-purpose event facilities and that they're hosting. Almost 70% of the respondents to the survey did note that that was one of the biggest strengths. Some of the challenges that they identified were the operations, the physical operations of the complex, some of the ventilation, HVAC challenges, the dust, and being able to maintain a level of cleanliness with the complex is a challenge in hosting their event. We've seen some attrition in terms of the event attendees. You can see with which events are able to be hosted in the marketplace because of some of the challenges. Repairs and maintenance and security issues with complex and the doors, access points, a challenge hosting events and having attendees. If you're having a swap meet, having a trade show, you are an exhibitor that's bringing in goods that you intend to sell or you want to make sure that the space is secure and that you need a nice place to stay in your hotel room, that your goods and assets are not in danger. So things along those lines are important. Make sure that we within the complex in order to be able to make it attractive.
Two questions. One, are the survey questions themselves and the responses available to us?
In aggregate, I can get you the actual surveys. I'd be happy to do that.
I'd like to see that. And number two, the 79% likely to return to the fairgrounds. What is the common metric there? What percent of exhibitors say they would return to any one location? What's a common?
Other similar studies that we've done?
Yeah.
I would say it's fairly consistent with other studies that we've done in terms of the response rate that we've got. I can't point to specific numbers off the top of my head on typically we'll have a relatively high interest in returning. I mean, these events have seen the value in Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County. They see the value at the fairgrounds, multi-purpose facilities that we have available to them. They'd like to come back. The biggest challenge is can they continue to grow their events? Can they continue to host their events here? Or are they going to start to see attrition? Are they going to start to see a decline in their attendance levels because we don't have the facilities that are industry standards like the events for Peru Center, like the Pentagon, complexes in the market that people have grown accustomed to, and being and understanding that's the level of service that they're able to achieve at industry standard complexes. That is the biggest challenge that we were hearing from these current past users, is that there are concerns that moving forward without continued reinvestment in the complex, that we will continue to see attrition in numbers of events, length of events, attendance levels at events.
Thank you.
Do you have a trend on that? I mean, it seems intuitive, right? If they've been coming here, they're gonna keep coming back. This is their home for that event. Have you seen over time where there's attrition happening, where they're coming back, or they have numbers to show their attendance because of the facilities?
It's more anecdotal information based off conversations that we had. No, I run past 20 years worth of.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you'd find that if you talk to Holly Rader and Scott Wick, that they've got lists.
I would think so. I would think that was accelerated in the last 10 years as the facility's gotten older. I just wondered if they were specifically saying, you know, we're gonna have to do something because we've looked at the last 5 years and our attendance has been dropping. Or we're having vendors, was telling us, you know, if this doesn't happen the next few years, we're not coming back. That's it.
And I know that they've shared that information too.
Jean has a question.
Did you ask those folks for that kind of information? Did you ask anybody for more, less anecdotal, more concrete information? Either from the Fair Board or from other users?
On specific trends in terms of the decline in attendance.
Just, yeah, and just any hard numbers on what is happening out there.
And the question that we asked of these current past users was, would you come back to the fairgrounds? Future? If so, would you be able to grow your events with improvements? Would you see a decline in your participation rate? Would you anticipate seeing decline in your participation rates if there were not an investment being made? More conversation, more anecdotal with the event rights. Specific data. Many of them, while they track their financial operations and revenue and loosely levels, don't necessarily have the historical records and or are able to share some of those detailed records. But again, something like we can follow up with Scott.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Okay, did you ask them the question, how much they would be willing to pay for increased fees? That with a nicer facility, instead of $1,000 a day, that maybe it's $2,500 a day or something like that. What was their, were they open to increasing their fees?
We did specifically ask if they were interested in increasing fees. However, the conversations with many of them surrounded and we had discussed with some of them at least the presence of nicer, newer facilities and the assumption that if nicer, newer facilities were available, would they be willing to pay additional fees in order to be utilizing those spaces. In our financial projections, I can tell you that we didn't assume a significant increase in rental rates that were being charged to the complex. So we weren't assuming that all of a sudden we're going to start tripling or quadrupling rental rates to attract these events, and we were holding that constant.
So while you didn't have a list necessarily, just the details of who has attrited, so to speak, were some of the people that had attrited included in your survey? Did you call people that used to come to the fairgrounds and no longer come?
From that list of groups that are not currently coming to the fairgrounds, yes, and that's be on the next slide. Those events that are no longer coming.
All right, so we have input from them, we just don't have the details of how many exactly.
On exactly how many have left over the years.
No, okay, thank you.
In addition to the current pass users, we did identify a number of non-local events rights holders, especially in livestock, ag-related flat floor, public consumer show event operators to understand from their standpoint, why are they not coming to Sioux Falls? The question that we asked them is specifically was if Sioux Falls and the Minnehaha County and the W.H. Line Fairgrounds offered facilities that were able to accommodate your events, what is the likelihood that you would bring future events to this marketplace, to this facility? We asked them to rate it on a scale from 1 to 5, with 1 being it doesn't matter what they develop in what you will develop in the marketplace, they're never going to come. 5 being as soon as you get there. What we were identifying was those that had either a 3, which was a possibly they would consider coming in the marketplace in the future. They would likely come into the marketplace, that would be a 4, or a definitely would be a 5. Among those respondents, we noted roughly a 67%, almost 70% positive response rate of non-local organizations that historically have not been coming to Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County as having an interest in their event here in the future. Roughly 72% of those events had not historically held events in the Sioux Falls marketplace previously.
But that's contingent upon a new facility.
Yes, sir. This is not, they are not coming right now because of the lack of facilities and infrastructure that we are operating. We need to reinvest in order.
If I could, I'd like to go back to that rates. On these other places where they have expanded, increased their facilities, do we have an idea as to how much they were able to increase their revenue from the users by having better facilities?
Yes, we can get that data. Again, from a modeling standpoint, as we're looking forward in terms of what does this translate to, what does this mean for WH Lyon Fairgrounds and the Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County Marketplace, we didn't assume a rental rate. We could, and realistically speaking, many of these events, organizers, rights holders typically look at having new facilities and assume that they're going to come in and pay a higher rate for renting the space. That is a typical response among event operators.
But at the same time, there may be some that their attractiveness now is the low rate. And they will put up with a lesser facility to have that low rate.
Regardless, the rate is lower than what we're seeing at the convention center, the premier center.
No doubt about it.
Be the anticipated rate is that it would be something that is affordable. And again, you've got, typically you would have highly dynamic pricing models for different events and activities that are coming in. You'll have events that are generating significant amounts of economic impact back to the community that may be afforded discounts on their rental rate. You'll have other events that provide a significant economic benefit, cultural benefit, community benefit to the community that have discounted rates. You'll have others that are generating significant amounts of revenue. So a swap meet, a consumer show that is driving revenue to the complex that would typically have a higher rate. So as we look at each of the individual events, there's going to be a different pricing model that's going to be in place for each, but ensuring that it continues to be affordable.
So when you talk about that dynamic pricing model, seems to me that one of the challenges we have here in Minnehaha County is that the revenue generation that might cause some dynamic pricing in another market wouldn't really work here in Minnehaha County because the income being generated in the community is not going to either the Fair Board or Minnehaha County to operate the facilities. It's going to other entities. And so that's our challenge, I think. So that dynamic pricing wouldn't work quite the same way here.
It would be much more of a challenge. You're absolutely right, because again, the county doesn't receive the sales tax revenue, does not receive the hotel, motel, or business improvement district tax revenue. It is so having a dynamic pricing model in place is one that would be intrinsic upon the direction of county commissioners and the board that is overseeing operations of this complex to understand which events are important. And do you want to charge the food shelf the same rental rates that we're charging swap meet? Some of the equestrian shows, livestock shows that are coming into the complex. There are different pricing models that are likely in place regardless of the economics behind it and the fiscal impacts and economic.
A dynamic pricing model, with a better facility, there's more higher end types of events that can pay more profitability. That's part of that, right, to offset some of the other
Correct.
sets of.
So with the analysis that was conducted from the local market, operations, competitive landscape, industry trends, comparable venues, market property, based off of the analysis that we recommendation, affordable building program for the WH Lyon Fairgrounds. We're looking at and recommending a roughly 50,000 square foot multi-purpose event hall, highly flexible, trackable seating, 2,500 that can accommodate third shows, livestock, equestrian shows, but can also pull back the seats and host swap meets and public consumer shows and trade shows, and other flat floor related events and activities. Adjacent to it would be roughly 100,000 square foot. Connected to it would be a 100,000 square foot multi-purpose exhibition space. Again, concrete floor, high-end climate-controlled HVAC systems, so that we can both host and have stalling and stabling, penning for livestock and horses and other animals, but also be able to clean it out and clear the dirt away, clear the shavings away, and be able to host trade shows and public consumer shows and things of that nature in this space. It would be connected on two sides with high roll doors, so that events that are using both spaces would have the sense that it is consistent, connected space. You would also, from a livestock equestrian show standpoint, have the ability to have penning in the 100,000, you're installing in the 100,000 indoor space. Have one door where you have access to warm-up space just outside of that door. That's directly attached to the stalling penning space. Walk through that door, go into the main show ring space, show exhibit, and participate in your activity, and then have the separate door where you are able to flow back out and back into your stalling, stabling, penning space. Space on both ends in terms of being able to accommodate a fair amount of events and activities. Roughly 7,500 square feet of breakout meeting rooms, office space, show office space, sports space, things of that nature, and then updating the 300 currently on site to a more modern standard. Right now, the amps, the electrical service that is afforded with these RV hookups is much smaller than what current trucks and trailers require. Getting that up to industry standard to allow for people to bring in their trailers, their animals, and we accommodate it on site. As well as some updated and expanded administrative space. That's something that's been.
So is that essentially replacing the Expo building? That's what you're suggesting, okay. Bring it down to a level I can understand it, so thank you.
And remember, after the workshop, we came back with a series of proposals. One was the economic, the physical planning, and we decided we're going to wait for the physical planning later when we'll do some, the master plan and the diagrams. So we're pricing based off this written material right here, right now. So we can fine tune as we get into pricing here in just a minute, that better if we decide to take that next step. You just decide.
So I know that moving dirt is a lot of work. And we spend a lot of time on the fairgrounds moving dirt. And I've come to learn that dirt isn't all the same. Correct? Some is looser, some is more compacted. Anyway, that's more information than I want to know. Is this assuming that dirt stays in place for those events, that you're not moving it? I mean, like, I understand that the Denny, how many events do they bring dirt in there for? Rodeo?
Bull riding's the big one.
Okay, and I assume that if somebody just said, I want to do an event and bring dirt in, they're being told. No.
That'd be big enough.
A really big deal to go through and do. Yeah. So does that dirt just kind of stay in place? Because you can move dirt, every week?
We move a lot of dirt, and for the events at the Denny, they use our dirt. They truck it to the fairgrounds, fill the arena, bring it back. But just a bull ride is a different footing than barrel racers, than team ropers, and a full blown rodeo. So there's a clay, dirt, sand mix. So you can kind of have a happy medium, and you can bring, users can bring in additional product. But to have an arena that stayed a full size arena that the dirt stayed in would be hugely beneficial, because we move dirt in and out 6 to 8 times a year. And currently we're blessed with working with the city with the training and everything that they do out there, storage, that we've been working with the city, and they come out and get some dirt in and out for us. If you had to have a dirt contractor move it, that bids as high as $16,000 just to bring dirt into the center room and then haul it back out. And you know, we get things done, because there's other events that, big events that don't need the dirt, so you gotta get the dirt out, get that event in, then right away you'll have to bring dirt out. So having something that had full-time dirt events would be great, and then clean them.
And the intention would be that 50,000 square foot space would be primarily dirt. But it would have the opportunity, if we did have some large events, that we could clear it out. And that we would note that $15,000 to $20,000 would be worth the investment, whether operationally from a revenue standpoint, or otherwise economically from the event that's being brought in, be able to clean it out and have that event. Additionally, and Scott, I'm sure can allude to, you can seasonally rotate those events where you've got a number of equestrian, livestock, ag related shows that are occurring back to back during certain times of the year. Clean it out once, and then you host your indoor flat floor shows at that space that is needed. One of the nice things with this setup is the opportunity to switch where that primary dirt location is from the center hall to one of the on the periphery to the north side. So now you can get up to 100,000 square feet of contiguous clean space relatively easily in that large exhibition hall, and have the dirt space be maintained in that 50,000 square foot event venue off to the side. That was going to be completely, at least physically separated from an HVAC standpoint. It'll be connected. You'll have access to and from, but the opportunity to keep the dirt in the one space and out of the other is going to be much easier, much more maintainable.
And even though we would have stalling temporarily in the 100,000 square foot facility, that would not necessarily mean we'd have dirt in there. There'll be a non-slip surface in the walkways and things of that nature, so that animals can move in and out, not necessarily dirt.
It may seem fairly insignificant, but there's a big thing in the rodeo industry. All the associations give awards for best arena footing, including arena footing. So, there's people that are well noted for having some of the best footing, and they get some of the bigger shows. But it's a tricky thing to get the right combination of everything. We've been pretty successful. We didn't win an award one year, but there's a lot of work and a lot of equipment and groomers and water and add sand and different things to it. But we get by, which is pretty minimal compared to the amount of effort to get the dirt in and out and store it. And then especially in the fall of the year, you get what we hopefully don't get the predicted in the next couple of days. If we had a pile of dirt outside, then the top 3-4 feet of it you can't use because it has too much water saturation. You dig down and use what's in the middle of it. So
I've been at the National Finals Rodeo for the last 5 days, and they were able to leave all the same dirt in there the entire week. But next week, they may take it out and have basketball in there. There's a concrete floor under that dirt. But that's the flexibility.
I'm not getting ahead of myself, but as events grow, what role does food and beverage play as far as revenue support for these events, longer events, that type of?
So beverage continues to be an important aspect, not only from a revenue standpoint, and experiential standpoint.
I haven't seen those numbers in here, and I would guess that it grows revenue wise too.
Yes, with the added attendance levels, we would anticipate seeing additional revenue opportunities from a food and beverage standpoint. And yes, we'll get into the financial projections here in just a moment.
Okay, thanks.
So is the multi-purpose event the only place that'll have seating? Like the retractable seating there?
Yes.
Okay, and if you're saying the show ring is 150 by 300, that takes 45,000 square feet. You're leaving 5,000 for all the seating?
It's roughly, yeah, and we're targeting 150 by 300. You have the capacity to get 150 by 300 if you have very limited seating just along the sides. Most of the shows and show rings, if we want a 2,500 seating capacity level within the complex, you could still get by with 125 by 250 show ring.
And that's not gonna detract from potential users.
No, 125 is good. And the barrel racers are the one that really set that win. But 125 could work as well. 150 by 300 just gives you a lot more flat, lot more flat floor space when you want.
All right, thanks.
A lot of times. We're not assuming that that's gonna all of a sudden shift away from the premier.
2,500 seats, no.
It's gonna be smaller shows, smaller relative to that rodeo. It's gonna be smaller. Attended events that require.
Thank you.
Square footage for rodeo, that probably wouldn't accommodate, back then, sorting pens, back pens, stuff like that for rough stock and time division. In that square footage. You can, probably 130 by 250 is about the smallest we'd want to go to accommodate all the people that compete in the different events. Obviously, if you have a bull ride, you can make a much smaller arena for many reasons. But as far as all the rodeo events, a 130 by 250 is about as small as we want to go. And then you have all those other ancillary pens and so on outside of that.
I'm sorry, was that a?
Just a comment.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Before I move on, I did know that there's a future opportunity. It's not intrinsic to the operations of the fairgrounds complex. There may be a potential opportunity for some outdoor amphitheater, festival grounds type of space that would be separate from the market segment that is attracted to the Levitt Pavilion. But that would be more, the intention would be to bring in, Red Rocks is a tough comparison for anything because it is the top tier, but something like that where you have that opportunity to bring in people from outside of the Minnehaha County marketplace to attend outdoor concerts, entertainment events, and festival activities. It will have to be very carefully considered, considering what's going on at the Denny Sanford Community Center with the pavilion. But those being that one being indoor space, one being more local community space, we did see that there may be a potential opportunity for that future investment somewhere down the road. Again, not intrinsic to operations, nor is it included in the projections that we've made in terms of financials.
There's a sensitivity issue there of noise that you have to watch for, and also timing. What time you will shut them down? 2 a.m., but something much earlier.
Easier by the interstate than it is downtown.
I'm just curious because you said it twice. It's not intrinsic. What do you mean when you say it's not intrinsic?
In order to be able to do things like the Sioux Empire Fair or other events complex, we would not need to have. We've already got a 4,200 seat grandstand that is used for the fair itself. The rest of the activity that's going on year round at the WH Lyon Fairground really doesn't require that space, whereas the 150,000 square foot multi-purpose that we are recommending would be needed in order to be able to accommodate events and activities that are currently going in there and have the capacity to start bringing in additional events.
And that study we did back in the 90s, I think, we actually enhanced the existing grandstand and made it more of an amphitheater.
So with that, we did a very high level order of magnitude construction cost estimate with architecture, other industry partners taking a look at recent past per square foot construction cost estimates for the various spaces that we're recommending with the multi-purpose event hall, the exhibition hall, the pre-function and support space, and the administrative space. We also assumed some improvements to the 4-H and FFA livestock facilities, upgrading the existing 321 RV hookups we have on site, and then developing more of a signature entrance, more of a sense of arrival, sense of place for the fairgrounds, for the event complex. Overall, based off of again, where we're seeing the industry today and current estimates on order of magnitude of construction costs. Hard construction costs would range somewhere between 60 and 73, roughly $73 million for the complex. You include soft cost, site improvements, that number is a total construction cost would be estimated somewhere in the realm of 84 to $105 million. I will caveat that very much at this point, by saying that construction industry over the past few years of the pandemic has been rather haywire, and there are stories of construction development that is going on right now that is needed, that is seeing cost estimates that are twice what they were just a few years ago, construction timelines that are twice what they were just a few years ago. There's a lot of discussion in the industry on whether those rates and timelines are here to stay, or if they're going to be like gas prices and they've gone up and will come back down eventually at some point here in the near future. So additional analysis will be required, and that's why we do have a bit of a range in terms of the construction cost. The other element to note is that we are talking about higher end facilities than what we currently have available in terms of the HVAC, in terms of the lighting, in terms of the utilities and complex would bring it up to an industry standard that we have not seen within the fairgrounds complex before. It's not just a pole barn with 4 walls and some lights. These are the types of facilities that not only are able to host and attract the events that we've historically been able to bring to the marketplace, but have that opportunity to put us on and in conversation with larger regional, potential national events that would be industry standard that they are seeing elsewhere in the country at places like Alliant Energy Center in Madison or Grand Park down in Fauner Park down in Grand Isle.
Improved acoustics, internet, activity, that kind of thing.
In terms of getting into some of the projection, what we would anticipate to see, we projected out the overall anticipated utilization by event type within the complex that you see in the left-hand column. Those are rough estimates on a typical annual basis for operations within the WH Lyon Fairgrounds. Typically, we'll see roughly 20 equestrian livestock shows, 19 trade shows, about 10 community or banquet events, graduations, things along those lines, maybe 3 concert festivals, and then the fair on an annual basis. The roughly 139, 140 annual event days, that's when the event is actually occurring, where you have exhibitors or attendees present. That's where the majority of economic benefit is generated. That's where a majority of revenue is generated. We also have to account for utilization days, which is from the move in of the event to the move out. So you have a date that the event moves, a livestock show will move in on Monday to start their show on Thursday. Attendees start to show up on Thursday, exhibitors show up on Thursday, will stay through Sunday, and then they need 2 days to move out. So you've got the utilization from the starting Monday to the following Tuesday of activity going on at the complex. So as we're taking a look at occupancy, as we're taking a look at capacity to add events and activities, to understand what the utilization profile looks like from an economic and financial standpoint. What the event days look like. We will project also, it's important to highlight in terms of projections, we would anticipate seeing an additional 42 total event days on an annual basis among 19 events leading up to a year of stabilization. So the first year after opening, we would anticipate a growth of events at the complex that would ramp up over the course of the next 2, 3, 4 years. The reason that we don't see that right away is because many of these events already have contracts or commitments years out. Many of them will sit there and like to hear the experiences of other event producers and attendees before they sign on to say that they are willing to come into the complex. You see that ramp up period typically over roughly a 4-year period, which is what we're projecting here. Once we reach that level of stabilization, we would anticipate again seeing roughly 73 annual events, 81 annual event days, and 440 utilization days for the complex.
Bill, how do you classify the event? Because when we submitted all the data, for instance, if somebody calls on a Friday and somebody wants to use the Nordstrom Johnson building on a Friday, we already have an event. We have a food giveaway that happens every week. Anytime there's a gathering of people with an activity taking place, that's our definition of an event. So the food giveaway happens, except a few times when it doesn't happen on a Friday. We classify that as each time it's an event. So a food giveaway would be 45 or 47 events in the South.
So we were food giveaways or some of the primary events, activities that are going on, and some of the support activities. This is really looking at the 150,000 square foot multi-purpose event.
Okay.
Complex.
Thank you for clarification.
Based off of the event levels, projecting, and we're starting to, as we alluded to earlier, roughly 500,000 total attendee days are being realized at the fairgrounds complex. With an increase in event levels, we anticipate that rising up to 620,000 total event attendee days, of which 220,000 of those non-local attendee days, generating 82,000, roughly 82,000 hotel room nights. These 18,000 hotel room nights over the course of the year, we would anticipate seeing at in the Sioux Falls, Minnehaha marketplace in terms of the direct new economic benefit of investing into the WH Lyon Fairgrounds. And these are segmented by the types of events with different spending patterns, different length of stay, different assumptions for each one of these different market segments to understand. I like the unique with each of the different markets.
How did campers play into the hotel bed nights? If you're coming in from out of town and you want to camp out at the fairgrounds, did you take a certain percentage out?
Yeah, there typically are going to be some folks that are going to stay in those trailers, especially some of the high-end ones that you see 100,000 plus trailers that people have. But a lot of times what they are doing, and we are holding constant, we are making assumptions for the number of people that are staying in hotel room nights in a hotel per night. So for example, with equestrian livestock shows, they have those RVs, we've assumed a higher number of occupants per hotel room night that is being generated within the market, assuming that 1 or 2 people may be staying in their RV, their camper, while others are staying at hotels. A lot of times you'll have an equestrian show. You'll have the owner and their family will stay at the hotel, whereas the handler and their support close to their camper, so they can be very close to their animal. Some owners that'll stay in the campers and they'll have their support, so they'll have family members staying in hotels. But we did make some assumptions based off of typical operations of these events, occupancy within the hotel. It's not just one attendee to the market is going to translate to one.
Thank you.
And I think just recognizing there are some very expensive animals that come through with this stuff. I mean, it's not unusual to have 6-figure animals.
We want to be close to them, and regardless of the economic value of the animals, there's that emotional value that many of them have. They want to be staying close. Having access through the RV hookups and those camper sites on location is a critical piece to operating a livestock ag. Based off of the projections of operations, levels, attendee levels, we can look at financial operations similar to how we presented them earlier. We're seeing roughly a $1.3 million operating revenue line item for, again, this is average over the course of 5 or 6 years. And maybe the commissioner, we'll look back to make sure that to understand the $150,000. Management fee and where that.
It doesn't include debt at all for the $1 million building.
Yes, pure operations. What we would anticipate the first few years ramping up to a level of sustainability is that we would likely have an operating deficit. We would need to have higher levels of staff in the first couple of years in order to not only sell but maintain the facilities. We would have some additional costs associated with operating space. While we don't have the full amount of events that we would be projecting in other years. We would have additional expenses from a marketing and operational standpoint those first few years as we're leading up to the operations and then the full stabilization for the complex. However, by year 4, we would anticipate that we would get back to a point of stabilized operations that would somewhere in the black. Like, again, it's going to fluctuate from one year to the next. Necessarily need to operate profitably every single year. Otherwise, that are out of our control, but over the course of a 10-year trajectory, we would anticipate seeing at least breaking slight operations.
This numbers just related to the facility itself and not the fair numbers? I know that's not a big number, but they did make $500,000 this year in the fair. So are the fair other revenues considered into this whole number?
Yes, the fair revenues are included and incorporated into this number. And there is an assumption of additional attendance levels at the facility. We would anticipate seeing the attendance levels at the fair increase. 105,000 is an average daily for the course of the fair. Which the three-day fair, rising up to roughly 115,000 on average per day, which is going to translate into additional revenues from exhibitors, food and beverage, and other assets on the complex as well.
Little question, and are the assumptions on the utilities decreasing moving forward based on efficiencies?
Yes.
Okay.
With the new facility.
Years I've had to up that number every year. Want to know you're correct.
Yes, no, with the new facilities, Scott, with better quality HVAC, the industry standard lighting, and the control applications that exist with lighting and operating the multi-purpose event facility that currently are not afforded to the as we see them today. We would anticipate seeing a slight decrease in the overall consumption of utilities at the county.
Thank you.
A couple comments. One, I think the $500,000 this year was a wonderful boon to them. They were very fortunate because of some COVID dollars that created that probably is an outlier.
We were afforded some opportunities with some partners that had some COVID grant monies that had to be used by the end of this year. So that was a one-time shot. That was probably right around $100,000. There's some gray area there. There's some intangibles when it comes to certain events on like a concert, for instance. You can't just say that a concert made or lost money. Did they come early? Did they buy ride wristbands? Did they spend time at the theaters? Would they have to be in your garden 3 hours early and then go in? So it all kind of rolls up into one. So the near perfect weather coupled with that opportunity with that partner afforded us both happening now in that property.
And then I just wanted to mention that because you did not put substantial rate increases in here for rental fees, that this is conservative.
In the intent with this is not to put operations and sales staff into we need to achieve a certain level of operations. Based off of what we were hearing from organizers and their interest in the Sioux Falls marketplace, both current, past, potential new user groups. In terms of gauging the operations of the complex today, we wanted to take a look at what are, I don't want to say conservative is not the right number, because I think it's pragmatic. I think it is what is reasonably attainable with consistent and measurable effort from the community, from operation. What is reasonable to anticipate seeing moving forward. I think there is a tremendous opportunity projecting in terms of being able to attract non-local, regional, and potentially niche national events that has not been incorporated into this, just for the simple fact that it is not something that I would want to project onto operations staff to say that we need to go to this level. It is not something that is very achievable here in the short term. Yes, ma'am.
But you go first.
But as I look at that, you're able to grow the 397 from the 1,313,000 to the 1,710,000. Okay, but the profitability went from 80 to 59. Okay.
Once again, I'm not used to economic development so much. So my brain doesn't probably process this appropriately, and you probably have a slide coming up. Look at these slides in advance. Is it common for you to make these presentations totally
So there are typically two separate buckets that we'll look at. One is the construction cost and the capital required to invest into the product. The other, just purely financial, is the operational level, because typically you don't have the same funding source for maintaining operations within the complex as you do developing the complex. And we'll get into a little bit of the different funding mechanisms that are standard in the industry here in a little bit, to identify opportunities and start the discussion in terms of identifying where that 70 to 80 make this, pursue this investment. This slide is really intended to understand ongoing need of investment aside from the capital required to invest into the complex.
So if somebody gave you 104 million, which I'm not expecting that, but if they gave it, this is what the county expense would be, right? Yeah. Can you?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's basically what it is. This is what the operating expenses is for the county moving forward, taking out the whole building project out of it, because we can't afford it. Somebody does have to afford it.
Let me ask Charlie, Joel, in other projects like this, have these projections proved reasonably accurate, because projections are
Yes, I mean, we've been doing this for it is. They are projections, and they are based off of a number of different factors that we cannot control. But I will say that projections that we made in past studies, whether here in Sioux Falls or elsewhere throughout the country, have been very accurate in what is that level of in terms of anticipating what the investment financial and
Real quick question. Say there's a tremendous amount of builders and this would happen. When you look at properties that are either nonprofits, for-profits, managed by the county or managed by a city or was city or county owned, we end up with this state-of-the-art facility, draw people from coast to border to border. Do you see, as far as the management of it, does it end up like you know, the SMGs of the world, or AGMs that run these big facilities, or as a percentage basis, somebody similar to our size and scope? Is it a local nonprofit that's been there forever? I'm not saying the Fair Association is going to be here forever. I think management of a new state-of-the-art facility has to be the best people in place for the best output that the Lyon family wanted as a sustainable destination for the economic impact in agriculture and education. I guess my question is how, and maybe you can't answer it, but based on other sizes, how do you see the management on those facilities?
So first, let me, before I get into a caveat, we didn't, for this study, we did not do a deep dive into the management of typical facilities of this nature. We have in the past, so being familiar with it on a high level, I can say that there are a variety of different ways that it is handled, and it is each unique to the individual marketplace. If there are operators in the community that see the benefit and have the opportunity to leverage facility assets such as the fairgrounds complex, the expo center, having a third-party operator is certainly an option. There are a number of communities that have either an authority run with a board that oversees the operations of the complex. There are a number of communities that have just a municipal department within the county, the city, the state that has staff people that are there allocated to operate the complex. Ultimately, it comes down to what the vision is, venue, marketing, the opportunities that are projected in terms of event levels, in terms of oftentimes with a third party operator, there's significant value from selling sponsorships, naming rights, other third party types of revenue sources rather than rental revenues, as well as operating the food and beverage on site as a potential revenue source stream. And certainly from a shared overhead standpoint, it's already in the market or nearby the market and have access to the events and organizations that would have an interest in that space, have the capacity from an economies of scale standpoint to leverage from a negotiating standpoint, hosting events at certain locations or certain areas within the community. There are a number of different benefits to having that third party private management firm that could be afforded. But again, it would require additional detail, additional analysis to determine what the right course or what the best direction would be. We assume that consistent management to what has been going on at the WH Line Fairgrounds would continue to operate the space here, assuming a successful marketing plan and rollout of that space to attract people.
We have a third party operator in.
The Jeff, the operator at the Premier Center,
ASM.
ASM. So there may be, again, there may be an opportunity to have an ASM that they may have an interest in managing both. Or they have an interest from OVG Spectra, which is a competitor of ASM, to come in and have their position in the marketplace.
Interestingly enough, Spectrum runs the food and beverage and ASM runs the facility.
Yeah. Regardless, if you've got a facility in a market that's attractive, the potential exists to bring that in. It's a question of additional analysis that would be needed in order to make recommendations on what the course of action. Other questions here? So again, as we've been discussing, there are significant economic benefits to investing in the fairgrounds complex. We're talking about the full economic output that we were highlighting. That's spending. Market spending is three different parts: the upfront construction cost, the building, and the dollars that are spent in the market for goods, services, labor, etc. The spending that goes on in the facility at the WH Line Fairgrounds complex by local, non-local, other visitors, rental revenues, food revenue, goods and services on site and making those purchases. But then importantly, and the biggest piece of this is the out of facility spending, those at hotels, restaurants, retail establishments, car rentals, and other goods and services throughout the Minnehaha County marketplace. Those direct spending dollars are spent throughout the community and acquire accounts for the indirect and induced spending that occurs. That's other goods and services that those dollars that are now brought into the marketplace are then respent on other goods and services and are continued to be respent throughout the marketplace. There's also improved spending to improved economic situation, business services, additional household spending, governmental and other sectors that are spending dollars to provide additional goods and services in the community because you now have more economic activity. All three of those together result in the economic output that is being projected. And we do, as we were discussing earlier, make our economic projections. We do hold constant any local spending that is assumed to be spent in the Minnehaha County marketplace. Already, these dollars that we are projecting are net new to the market that otherwise would not be here but for the presence of the WH Lyon Fairgrounds or new month. Based off of the projections and the analysis that it's conducted, the current fairgrounds complex has roughly a $35 million total economic output. It's $1 million direct annual spending going on in the Falls and County marketplace today. With, as we alluded to earlier, roughly $500,000 city sales tax revenue that's generated. 389 jobs, full and part-time jobs that are created throughout the community on an annual basis, and roughly $12.8 million in personal earnings that is generated within the community. By year 4 of the stabilization of events and activities at a newly developed multi-purpose event complex at the fairgrounds, we would project the direct spending to rise to roughly $29 million per year, with total economic output up to $44.7 million a year. Over the course of 20 years, that would, if you run the math out, it's a little over $1 billion over 20 years. With that new investment, including the construction cost and the economic output from the construction, the in-facility and out-of-facility spending in the marketplace, compared to what we're seeing today. If we were to extrapolate the 20 years worth of economic activity that is being generated by the WH Lyon Fairgrounds today, we're roughly $460 million in incremental direct spending, roughly $704 million in incremental economic output, and roughly $9.9 billion in incremental city sales tax. That is not assuming any attrition over 20 years if we were not to reinvest in WH Lyon. That's assuming that operations, attendance levels, other activities stay consistent over the course of the 20 years. The incremental projections are just based off of what we anticipate seeing over the course of the 20 years with the investment in the companies.
You know, it's an interesting point and something that I've been pondering. What if nothing is done? What type of attrition would we see? Is there any guidance on that? Any direction on that?
We would anticipate seeing we did not project out what that attrition would look like. It's something that I'm to another additional analysis for this. I would anticipate on an annual basis continuing to see a decrease in attendance levels at the county fair, at the various events. And over time, as these events rights holders continue to see that attrition in attendance levels, they start to look at other event facility complexes throughout the state region in which to host their events, and we start talking about league events. The rate at which that occurs is going to be different for each market, different for each situation. We're pretty Spartan in terms of facilities that we're offering right now, where the facilities are not very consistent with industry standards. I would fear that we, without reinvestment in the near term, we're going to, and we would likely start seeing reinvestment into complexes like State Fairgrounds, like Bonner Park in Grand Island, like Alliant Energy Center in Madison, like the State Fairgrounds in Des Moines, and some of the other event facilities throughout. Especially as we're seeing within from a community standpoint, the investment into other assets like the Convention Center, the Premier Center, the Pentagon, the Pavilion, understanding from a community standpoint, what is like from a facility standpoint, to establish that baseline off at times. Looking at that same and wondering and asking questions why we're not seeing that at other event venues.
Joel, we've had events, leave and book already for the decks in Huron. It's not even built yet, so. South Dakota Rodeo Finals, relay event. We hosted them this year. They're going up there for the next 2 years. We weren't the contender for a big cattle show that's going to the decks in June, about 600 head of cattle, maybe more. Terry L. Schmidt has files where people have said they loved Sioux Falls, but due to the condition of the expo building, that, you know, they wouldn't be asking for any more quotes. I mean, I think we do very well with what we have to offer the users now, but anytime there's a new building, you're gonna have people go try it out. Our leg up is, I believe we have a great potential of bringing them back with what you're talking about because of what Sioux Falls has to offer.
That's an excellent point, Scott. And to that end, one of the things that Sioux Falls has is, again, that destination appeal. It's already established convention center arena standpoint as a destination market. It's established in sports tourism a destination market. There are a lot of assets that are already in place in Sioux Falls from a hotel, restaurant, entertainment, retail establishment standpoint to attract, retain, and maximize the return of economic benefit, economic impact with the community marketplace. That candidly throughout communities throughout the state of South Dakota, throughout the regional marketplace, we don't see as much opportunity to attract and generate that interest. In the groups that we spoke to, that one of the things that we heard consistently was that we would love to come to Sioux Falls. We love the attractiveness of the destination. We love the location. We love the market. That amenities that it affords, it offers. We just don't have the right facilities in place in order for us to come, or we need to have the facilities improved for us to continue to come here. There's potential, I think, to grant, and this is not incorporated in these numbers, but there is potential to attract and get into the conversation on a regional and even a niche national level for hosting larger significant events. One event that we surveyed, Dakota Fest, that's held up in Mitchell on an annual basis, is a tremendously economic impact generating event that would not consider Sioux Falls right now, but look at the attractiveness of the market and said that they would have an interest in exploring opportunities if facilities were here and able to accommodate them moving forward. Understanding what that marketplace looks like from a large and significant economic impact generating event level standpoint. We need to, right now we're not even in the conversation. These groups, they're looking at Alliant, they're looking at Madison, they're looking at complexes throughout the region. Not coming to the fall.
Okay, question for you. So that it's incremental cumulative 20-year city sales tax, 9.9 million. But when I look up at the chart, the city sales tax is 14.3, and with no change, it's at 9.9. That looks like a growth of about 4.4 million.
I'll revise that number down below. That is in there. Keep that updated.
Thank you.
I think we're running a little over time. I was wondering if we could just skip to the last slide.
So then if people need to,
Yeah.
they can, and if they have questions after.
Highlights the annual, that's what we would, which I think what's going on is, what we have to face in some of the places. Highlighted a number of these discussion points already, some of the additional benefits outside of the economic benefits. Economic and informative effects at the fairgrounds, having the identity of the Sioux Empire Fairgrounds, having the identity of community from a livestock market segment, elevating the presence within the visitor and local industry, opportunities in visitation, spin-off development, revitalization in the area, and certainly this is an asset that is heavily utilized by folks throughout the local community. It's an asset that is highly valued. Going to reinvest in it is more than that to enhance and improve. Continue residential. And then last slide that we've got our discussion on typical industry funding sources. What we ideally from and this is from a construction cost standpoint. Typically, what we look for from a construction funding mechanism is one that is afforded the benefit of what is being invested in. So what that means is if you are investing into a multi-purpose event facility that is generating economic benefit within the community, whether generating sales tax revenue, hotel motel tax revenue, additional development, or other economic investment in the area, finding how those investments are being realized within the community and tapping those, leveraging those as a funding source, the construction cost for space and make space move. So as you look at typical funding sources, we've got a variety of different funding mechanisms that are used throughout the country for these spaces. Not the least of which motel taxes, sales taxes, and tax increment financing opportunities. These all can be explored further here as potential opportunities. There are a handful of different ideas that have been kicked about that I think are worthy of consideration in terms of generating, leveraging the incremental and the impact revenue that is generated, the economic benefit that is generated by these facilities, as well as leveraging utilization of the complex in the marketplace. Those would be through the private sources, through either grants or donations, fundraising campaign. There are a number of firms throughout the country that can come in and give you this in terms of the opportunities that exist from a funding standpoint to generate capital investment donations to go toward the capital investment in the complex. Then also taking a look at opportunities like naming rights, sponsorships, vendor rights, registration fees, partnerships, public-private partnerships that could be considered for developing utilities or other elements within the complex. But it is a complex puzzle. Some additional discussion in terms of finding the right sources.
Questions?
I don't know that it's a question, but I just want to say, like, the study has done a great job of showing that the Fair Board and the county have honored the legacy of the Axtell and Lyons families. And the opportunity that exists before the task force and the commission is frankly because of that commitment. And the thoughts that I have for the task force, the commissioners, and honestly, the city council really center on culture. Sioux Falls is known for tackling and resolving hard issues to move forward. Roads to the falls, the viaduct, moving the train tracks, etc., when they want to. So I'm trying to think through whether Sioux Falls is ready to embrace the events and the community that this space will bring to the city. I'm thinking of the support with fundraised dollars, support of attendance at the events, and support with a cultural embrace of the event. I also have been in Vegas during the rodeo. And it's a very different experience to be in Vegas during the rodeo than it is to be in Vegas during a different time of the year. And I'm wondering if Sioux Falls will break out the cowboy hats and the boots to welcome and embrace this part of its identity. From what I've seen in this community, this is the heart of the issue. If the community supports this, the rest of it, figuring out the tax revenue, how to deal with the location, and how to do all of the other hard things will get figured out. So my question really is, does the community want to support this type of event space? It's a cultural question, and I'm intrigued to see how the answer reveals itself in the next phase of this project.
Other comments? From the task force, Scott?
I will say, as far as all of our rodeo events now, they're our last Bulls and Bronx, which is our. We had to turn people away when you have that triple invitational, the FPRA rodeo. The big extravaganza this weekend that are hugely attended, Sioux Falls. I mean, this community, yeah, they'll bring out the boots, the hats. I mean, it's very obvious and evident with the NFR now striking a deal with the Convention Center for 5 years of the second richest rodeo in the nation. Yeah, they do support that, and coupled with all the agricultural events, and filling in with other ancillary events, I think we have a history to prove that they support.
I know he has to go.
Yeah, I want to thank you guys for coming. I mean, I think the point of today, since none of us had any opportunity to look at any of this information before 30 minutes before this meeting, we need some time to absorb it, think through it. For the beginning of this, not anywhere near the middle or the end, but I really appreciate all the work that all of the folks here in this room have done. So thank you. Sorry, I do have to run.
Additional.
I'll work with Joel for some last minute tweaks out of there. And as soon as that's done, we will get it on our website. And I'll send it out to all of you here. We'll tweet out on it. It'll be on the county website. So once we've got those couple things taken care of, we'll get that out there.
And as a task force, we really haven't had a chance to meet. When will we get a chance to meet on this?
Carol.
I think
a meeting.
Yeah, we'll start in January. Bob threw out the other day a challenge to wrap up by March. I think that was a great challenge. It's good to have my feet over the fire. I appreciated that. And so I think we talked about doing maybe something every week just to keep it moving at this point. And I guess I would just like to ask Joel that if there's a point a few weeks down the road that we say we really need to better understand a couple things on here, that we could pick you up by Zoom.
Absolutely. As long as the snow's not flying, I'll drive back down.
Additional comments from the task force. Public comment time. Is there anyone from the public? Comment?
If I could, just the task force, I would say, thank you, Minnehaha County, for your willingness to involve people from the community with this. So thank you.
Very exciting, very exciting. So, Commissioner Barth and I will be gone. You'll have 2 new commissioners. Joe is here today. Jen had a family issue that she could not attend, but they will be getting up to speed. I think they have been. And we'll be bringing additions to the board to help us move forward. So, with that, if there's nothing else, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A motion a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Well, I won't.
Some of that was Tylenol at 2.
I got. Where should I?